Great. So my name is Thomas Wilburn. I hope that my slides are coming up here. Oh, running to the front. So I did the VGA thing. That didn't. All right, well, let's try it again.
Wait, you're HDMI?
Yes. Is that not HDMI? So many plugs. Okay. Anyway, cool. While he's messing with that, I can go ahead and start a little bit. So my talk has a really boring title. It is called Using Custom Elements in Production. And I think it kind of should be boring, to be honest with you, because what I'm trying to do is convince you that these are a technology that you can use. It's really common in a lot of web technology. Something comes out, and there's kind of a lot of noise about it, and then because browser support is not good, we don't ever actually touch that thing ever for years until finally somebody figures out a way to make it work. Seriously? I'm not actually seeing it like pop up the little thing at all. And this is the right adapter? And is it plugged in? Should we plug it in and unplug it? Or that's what I'm always supposed to do, right? Okay. Anyway, if you're interested in looking at the slides while we get this sorted out, and hopefully I don't necessarily need a loaner, they are actually all online. If you go to thomaswilburn.github.io/ and this name seemed really clever at the time, and now that I'm going to have to say it out loud, it seems much less clever. The name of the repo is slide and a dash, and then the word dash, and then another dash, and then show. So it's slide dash show, using the dashes in between, because that seems like a good idea. There's a reason for that, which, sweet. All right, well, we're getting a loaner up, so that's going to be fine. And yes, Dave has already pulled it up. You are the man, Dave. All right, what do we have to do to hook up to this thing? This is what I get for bringing a Chromebook, actually, to a presentation. Seemed like a really good idea at the time. Not a great idea now. So I will go ahead and warn you, like the last time that I gave this talk, I also had to use a loaner Mac because they only had VGA. I don't use a Mac, so I don't know any of the keyboard shortcuts, so we'll just have to hope that nothing blows up on me. Yeah, I think we're set up. Okay, cool, excellent, here we go, awesome. All right, yes, technology, y'all. All right, so there you go, there's the URL for the slideshow. Who am I? Why am I talking to you about this stuff? My name is Thomas Wilburn. If you're trying to find me on social media or on GitHub, I am at Thomas Wilburn pretty much everywhere. It's nice, that's not a super common name, so I get it whenever I sign up for it. And I'm a data journalist for the Seattle Times. So I do work on the web, and I love the web. But I tell stories on the web. I don't work in WordPress. I don't work in the CMS. Instead, I work with reporters and editors to try and find a way that we can tell stories about the news in a way that will captivate and intrigue and hopefully spur people to action. A good way to think about this is, if you see something that moves and is neat and inspiring on the website, my team probably did that. If the ads bug you, or if you can't sign into your subscription, don't talk to me, I can't fix it. So that's a whole other team. All right, and I want to talk today about Web Components 101, which are something that we've been using at the Seattle Times for about 2 years now. And it's a really old idea. The idea of web components is that just like we have all of these built-in tags that we build stuff out of, we should be able to make our own tags. And those tags should be able to have their own behavior. They should be able to hide their own insides so that they present a nice unified front to the rest of the browser. They should load quickly. And this is not a new concept. This has been kicking around a long time, and it's not even a new concept for implementation. Like if you turn on the right flags and then you inspect a video tag in a modern browser, the controls for that video tag are built in HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So browser developers are able to do this, but it hasn't been exposed to the rest of us. And so the web component spec is the idea that we should be able to take 4 technologies, which are in varying states of disarray, and after you assemble all of those, you should be able to make your own tags. So those are custom elements, which are about to go into multiple browsers on version 1. There's templates, meaning the template tag, and that exists in a bunch of different browsers. Shadow DOM is likewise about to go in a modified version as version 1. Both of those were previously implemented in Chrome as version 0. And then there's HTML imports, which is probably dead in the water, and I don't really understand what the fuss is about it anyway, so we'll just pretend that doesn't exist. And like I said, this is not a new concept. So while all of this stuff has been stalled in committee, there's been a bunch of people who have been working on this concept. So you've got Angular directives, you have React components, Polymer has DOM modules. Polymer is my favorite of all three of these, and it's not necessarily because I like Polymer, although it's fine. It's actually because they have this element catalog that you can visit online where they show all the different tags. And they start out normal. It's like, oh, here's a layout tag. And then it's like they did a lot of really strong drugs and dared each other to come up with like the weirdest thing. So there's a tag in there for installing your service worker. There's a tag in there for handling your Bluetooth. If you want to connect to a Bluetooth layout, there's a tag that does client-side routing. Like at some point, someone's going to get really high, and the next day there's going to be a thing in the element catalog for friendship. And the documentation is just going to be like, the real browser was in your heart the whole time. It's going to be great. I make fun of Polymer, but it's awesome. But I was not introduced to custom elements through any of these things. I was introduced because a couple of years ago, I was not working for the paper. I was working for a game company called ArenaNet on a game called Guild Wars 2. And one of the interesting things about Guild Wars 2 is that, like a surprising number of games these days, parts of the UI are actually built with web technology, because everybody hated the UI framework that existed in the game. And so instead, they were like, well, we can get this done faster and easier if instead we build it with an embedded browser. And so this is the trading post, which we were working on revamping. It had been rushed out, and we were trying to improve it. I didn't take this screenshot, by the way. I lifted it off the company blog, but I love it because this person, who is probably my ex-manager, has gone into the trading post, and the first thing they've done is look for pi, which is what I would do if I were in a fantasy universe. And it says, the pi, you probably can't read, it says the pi is nourishment. It gains health every second for like half an hour, which no actual pi does this, but it would be great if it did. But when you mouse over this pi and you get this little tooltip, that tooltip is actually implemented in the engine, because there are these little icons all over the place. These games are about managing your inventory and packing, basically, as much as they're about anything else. And so what we would do is, instead of re-implementing that, we would call out to the engine whenever you moused over one of these thumbnails. We also wouldn't load those thumbnails over the network. We would load them from the game package, which was gigs of material that players had painstakingly downloaded. And hooking all of that up, at first, we were using YUI, don't ask. And it was kind of a hassle, and one of the very smart people on my team said, why not, instead of using YUI and having to re-implement these things and reinitialize them every time we refresh this screen, let's make them a custom element. And when the browser sees that custom element, we can just put a GW2 item tag into our markup, and when the browser sees it, it'll take care of initializing all that stuff and registering the event listeners, pulling the image out of the game. Like it handled all that for you, and it was such a natural way to work. Like it wasn't a huge quantum shift, but it just felt so nice to be able to do that compared to the way that you would initialize a YUI widget, which was like a process that would spit out an error log of 17 different levels of call stack or something. So that stuck with me, and when I came to the Seattle Times, web components was one of the things that I was really interested in using on our site. And so today, the Times is one of the largest deployments of custom elements in the world, and there's an asterisk next to that because it is a lie. It's not true at all. Right, because like anything built, like Google Music obviously would swamp us in a heartbeat. But if you add enough caveats, that maybe becomes true. We're one of the few people who are using them without a wrapper. We're not using Polymer. We're not doing anything. We're just writing raw web components. And we use them on a daily basis in front of a general audience, i.e. 10 and up. So this is a thing that you can do that can actually have benefits for you. In your own sites. Like, this is not some exotic technology that's untested. We do have some people come to the Seattle Times. And the reason that we use components are really simple, right? First, we want reusable building blocks that we should be able to work with and use over and over again. I operate on deadline. I operate on a newsroom deadline, even worse, and so I'm often on really short time frames, and so it's good to have reusable things. It creates simple domain-specific languages that non-coders can understand. I have a really hard time teaching people in my newsroom how to write JavaScript for obvious reasons, but a lot of them speak HTML. And so if I can give them something that's basically HTML and they can build stuff with that, that's really, really handy. And then finally, it's not really a proprietary framework. To the browser, these things just look like elements. And that means that we can use them kind of no matter what it is that we've decided to pull in. So we will write stuff in vanilla JavaScript, in Angular, I've done some stuff in Reactive. We've used all kinds of stuff, and it's really nice not to necessarily have to worry about, like, will this intermix? It's just a fundamental building block that we can work with. And our methodology for building these things is pretty simple. The only thing we polyfill for is custom elements. So we add the shim that Andrea Guimarchi wrote. It's like 4K gzip, so it's practically nothing. Everything else just runs on our build system. If you saw Liz's talk and you like the idea of doing like fun stuff in static sites, that's our build system. We do everything that way. A lot of newsrooms do. And so for templating, we have a require hook in our browserify process, and we can pull in HTML, and then we can process that with .js or whatever templating we want to use. For shadow DOM, which would give us style isolation, we write less, and we've got another hook that lets us require less and package that into our app bundle. And if you're interested in how that works, we do have a template that we use when developing this, and it gives you kind of like a nice starting point for if you wanted to write a small element. Now, what I'd like to show you theoretically would be the most common element, but unfortunately, it's a responsive iframe. And so you can't see it, right? Like you can see that there's something there, but the iframe itself is just a window into something. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the elements that we use on a regular basis that are more visible, because it's not just an iframe that adjusts its height. So one of these is image slider. And this is the kind of thing that a few years ago would probably be a jQuery plugin. But these days, my teammate, Audrey, was working on a project in Seattle about real estate. And so we were finding places where someone had bought a small house on a large plot of land, and then they had gone in and torn down the small house and built a huge house that went from like place to place. And we wanted to be able to compare those, so we got permission to use Google Street Maps, or Street View, and you could just slide across. This is one that I did for the Elwha River Valley, right? Here's before they blew up the dam, here's after. And so you can just kind of switch between these two. And using this element is super easy, right? So I just take two images with alt text, because I felt guilty about not having alt text. And I wrap those in an image slider element. And then if the JavaScript runs, then that's great. And it becomes a slider. It bootstraps itself up, and it makes itself available. If the JavaScript does not run, then I've still got two images on my page, and they've probably still got captions, and probably nobody even knows the difference. Another one that I really like to show off of this, we did a thing on Felix Hernandez, who is the pitcher for the Mariners. Are there any Mariners fans here? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it is. It's always a time of sadness for the Mariners. We are totally losing our press pass if they ever see this. So we did this thing where, like, when Felix first joined the team, everybody was kind of making fun of him because he was like this kind of like baby-faced new kid. And then as he's gotten older, he's like 30 now, so he keeps working out. And so I love this because it's like a time lapse of what happens when you move to Seattle. Like you get a tattoo and like a horrible goatee. Thank God he shaved that thing off now. So this is really easy for us to integrate into stuff now, because we can just npm install this element and then use it in our page if we add it to our browserify bundle. And it makes that kind of very common UI tool really, really simple. So that's not super impressive, but let's do something more interesting. So for elections, we want to talk about where people manage to win counties, right? If somebody is running for governor, or as is happening this year, we want to be able to show results by county. And the best way to show results by county is using a county map. And the best way to do a county map is using SVG. And my apologies to Tyler for his talk yesterday, but although SVG is really great, like the API for this thing is like a box of spiders. Like, There's like no sanding that's been done on the rough edges. So SVG has this interesting problem, right? Like I want to be able to take this map, which is repeated multiple times on the page, and I want to be able to color it, but I don't want to just include the SVG inline because that's going to make my page really huge, especially if I've got a bunch of these maps, and I do. So it's the same map. I can't include it using an image tag because then I don't get access to the DOM, and then I can't reach into it and color different counties and offer pop-up information. So instead, we create this SVG map element here. And so you include this just like it's an image tag. You give it a source. It loads that. If there are multiple on the page, it knows to go through and like only download it once and then farm it out to all of those tags. And then it inserts it inline. But the other thing that I really like about it is because of the aforementioned box of spiders effect, it provides some really handy utility methods, right? You can add new methods to these elements. And so I can initialize an SVG map, and then I can immediately call, hey, for each path that matches the county selector, I want you to run this function, and I'm going to update its style. And I can even call that while it's still loading. And it'll keep track, and it buffers that callback, and then once it's all ready, it will run that for each path. So this is a really, really nice way to use vectors without having to worry about kind of the infrastructure that I would still have to build to handle loading and processing SVG. And then kind of my favorite, which is leaflet map. We build a lot of maps at the Seattle Times. Like there's a lot of just really simple maps. And we do it using Leaflet, which is, of course, the premier open source Google Slippy Maps kind of map. This is one we did for the May Day protests, because every day it's like a holiday in Seattle. People go out into the street and get tear gassed by the police. Well, once a year this happens. And so we had our reporters go on, and they tagged themselves on Twitter with the geolocation, and then we would pull from that API and update this map in real time. So it's really, really simple to pull together this kind of map. But as much as I love Leaflet, like I kind of hate doing things like making markers. And instead of writing the code, I really want to be able to do it in a declarative way. So when I make a map using the Leaflet map element, I can say, look, I just want a Leaflet map at this lat long and this zoom. I want you to use this base layer using the tile layer child element. We've got a bunch of them predefined. They already include the sourcing, so I don't have to worry about giving credit to OpenStreetMaps the correct way. That's all built in. And then I say, hey, put a map marker right at the center of that thing, give it an ID, and then any content that I put inside the map marker element is going to be used as the pop-up. So that when I click, I can just write HTML in there, and it will automatically instantiate that pop-up using all the Leaflet methodology. I can even load data in using the GeoJSON element. We don't use this a lot, but it does come in handy every now and then when we're working with GIS data. And the nice thing about this is, again, it goes beyond just the markup, but then your element can have additional properties that makes it useful. So once I like document.querySelector for that element, I can access the leaflet property or the map property to get access to the library or the instance. So if I want to mess with that map once it's instantiated, I'm not stuck with what I created or declared. I can actually keep going from there. Also, I gave the map marker an ID back here. And once I do that, I can access element.lookup, and that will give me access to the thing that was created from that declarative tag. So I can actually use that then to get to the marker if I feel like it. So we use this all the time. We'll declare a bunch of markers, and then I can go in and use this API to fit it to make sure that on whatever screen size, it will fit the bounds of the reader's display, and they can see everything that's on that map. And then, of course, the piece de resistance. Oh, wow, that's the worst French accent ever. The finale. This slideshow is actually a web component, because I thought that'll be fun. Let's actually just, let's do it live. That always goes well. So if we inspect the page here, and we'll zoom in, and this is the part where my lack of, oh, hey, I do know how to do it. Sweet. Over here in the body, you've got a slideshow element. And then within that, it contains a bunch of text slides, and then also I defined a code slide type for the slides that have just code on them, and those are opposite because I'm terrible at writing text parsers. But so I could go through and I could extend this too. I could go through and create additional slides if I really wanted to, and just define those as a new type of slide element. And then the slideshow would know how to interact with those children's slides, and this would be really, really easy to extend. It's also just a really nice way to work. And if we pop this out, there are a couple things in the code that I want to talk about real quick. So if you're thinking about doing this, if you look at the other things that I put up here, like I'm proud of them, but they're a little bit written, like they're written while I was learning. And so it was really important to me that this actually be written to take advantage of all the stuff that I've learned while writing those other elements, so that this would be an example of best practices. So one of the things this does, all communication inside this element is done via events and properties. So the text slide and the slideshow elements don't ever reach into each other and like call each other's internal methods or anything like that. They use that barrier, that separation of events and properties. For example, if I were to go into the elements and I were to edit one of these or rearrange them, if I were to edit the text on one of these, it would actually update. Oh, I missed this. That's my favorite slide, too. Q fumbling around in the dev tools because it's so accurate. But if I were to go in here and say, "You're awesome," when I update that, this is the part where I start to lose the plot. Exit full screen. It came back, but I think I lost it. Oh, no. Why would you do this to me, Dave? What were you thinking? Huh? F3? You've just confused me more. I'm more lost now. That was a... Oh, hey. Oh, crap, spaces. You are the death of me. So, yeah, once I edited that, right, like that slide element actually, instead of directly changing anything, what it does is it updates its property, that's the parsed content, and then it dispatches an event up to the slideshow and says, "Hey, I'm updated," and then the slideshow can interface. So this is not actually just for communicating with the outside as a user, but even communicating within these elements. That's really the way to write these things effectively. And part of the reason that I would say that, if we can go back, one of the things that you run into a lot with this is these elements will not necessarily upgrade synchronously. The parent may upgrade before the children do, or the children may upgrade before the parent, and so you need to be able to handle those kinds of events, right? Like if the child should not be trying to reach into something that is unupgraded yet, because then it's not going to be able to work. So it's really important to use these standard DOM things. I think this is going to be an important principle going forward. I think as this becomes a lot more common, I think we're going to judge a lot of web components by how well they blend into the DOM. And I think if you've struggled with the DOM, as I have over the years, like that sounds like a really funny concept. Like, why would I want to be like the DOM? It's the worst. But I think although we have issues with a lot of the DOM methods, like the architecture of it is actually really good and really smart. And so I think that's part of our goal, is to write things that should be indistinguishable from the elements that are in the browser. Second point, I kind of skipped over that to 3. The second point, elements should do one thing well. This is a mistake that I made with leaflet map. The leaflet map element, the overarching one, does all of the parsing of all of its children, and it's all this logic. And it's great, but it's a huge chunk of code, and none of those other things can be broken up or extended. And the goal should be, I think, like this one, each individual element should just should be capable of doing like its own little role, and then composing these things is really what makes it feel natural. When we look at something like leaflet map or like this, being able to write out the structure of our application using these custom elements really only works when they each have their own little role to play and can compose in a lot of the same ways that a Unix pipeline composes. And then finally, I wanted to talk about, I mentioned earlier that there's the V0 and the V1 specs. So Chrome shipped this stuff, and then everyone was kind of like, "Oh, Chrome, why'd you do that?" And they didn't move forward with the document.register element that Chrome had shipped. And so now they're moving forward. Safari prototyped it, and although that makes me really nervous to say Safari prototypes anything, like it turns out that these changes were all very positive. And so the spec moving forward is different in a lot of ways, but it's actually really easy to write an element that's going to work with both of those types. So for example, in V0, which is what shipped in Chrome, the earlier version, when an element is on the page and it either gets upgraded or the parser encounters it, it calls the created callback. So, hey, you've been created, and then it can do its upgrade. In the V1, part of what they were really pushing for was that they wanted to be able to use this syntax where they say class slideshow element extends HTML element. They really wanted to go with ES6 syntax. And so in this case, we just have to also call the upgrade here, but they're compatible, right? Like one or the other will be called. That's fine. There are a few places where after we upgrade, some of the callback names have changed. So when something is added to the page, it used to be attached callback, and now it's connected callback. It used to be detached, now it's disconnected. But to be honest with you, it was actually easier for me to write this code to work in both specifications than it was to get it to work across the two polyfills and the native browser implementation that I tried. That was the part that was interesting because they had different upgrade timing. This stuff was a piece of cake. So there's no reason right now that you can't write code for both of those specifications and just be able to swap out the new polyfill when the spec becomes deployed in more browsers and there's a native implementation. All right, let's see if I can get back here. I am awesome, thank you. All right, so where do we go from here? Like I said, document.register element is being replaced, and it's being replaced with a custom elements.define, but they're pretty much the same. Register element takes a prototype. Custom elements.define takes a constructor, which is what you get back from a class, but I wrote mine just in regular JavaScript. And as far as polyfills, like I don't think that's a scary thing. I think we shouldn't necessarily try and wait or worry about the fact that you've got this like old polyfill that you're going to have to swap out. You're not going to be making custom elements on the page. Like you shouldn't be instantiating 1 million of them, so it's not a speed thing. So I like to think of it not really as obsolete polyfill, but really more of just like a vintage polyfill. Like it's classy. It's got like a nice jacket on, and maybe if we just swap out the pants, like it's going to look great still with my custom element, but you know, less 70s and more where we are now. If I've convinced you that this is a good idea, if this seems intriguing, please feel free to ask me questions about it later. This is the advice I'd give you. Build small, self-contained elements to start. We did not try and build whole apps out of web components. We just built little blocks that we needed to reuse all the time. Work with the grain of the DOM. Use events, use properties. Don't create methods because then you have to null check before you call them. Special note, I just added this, don't reinvent the select box, right? Like, everybody makes this mistake once in your career, then you never do it again. Don't think that just because you've got web components that it's still cool to reinvent, like, no, just let select be, it's its own thing. There's so much there. And just write with an eye on the V1 spec, and I promise you, I think that transition's gonna be pretty painless. And you'll be able to write these components and just move them into the future. So that closes out my slideshow. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. I am at Thomas Wilburn, or that's my email address, which fits nicely around it. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Woo! Thomas Wilburn, everyone.